Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. This book has been around for decades, and it promises readers a lot. Healing, success, and happiness just from tapping into your subconscious mind. What do you think it is about this book that keeps people coming back to it even after all these years?
It's really interesting how Murphy takes a practical approach to explaining this force within us. And he doesn't just talk about the power of the subconscious, he really gives you techniques and examples to help you achieve it.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit more. Murphy's big idea is that we all have these two parts of our mind, the conscious, reasoning part, and the subconscious, which doesn't really question anything. He compares the subconscious to soil. What do you think he means by that?
I think it's a great analogy because it means our subconscious mind is always taking in information, like seeds being planted. And just like those seeds, the thoughts and beliefs we plant in our subconscious eventually shape who we are.
Yeah, and Murphy argues our subconscious doesn't really differentiate between what's literal and what's figurative. And, he illustrates this with that story about the man who wished he could give his right arm for his daughter's healing. It's always a little bit scary to read that one. What do you think people should really take away from that?
Well, I think it's a good reminder to be careful about what we're thinking about because our subconscious takes everything at face value. It's not trying to apply logic or understand your intentions. So yeah, it's really important to be mindful of what thoughts we allow into our minds.
Because those thoughts could manifest into something real.
Right.
It really makes you examine what you believe, even those things that you don't realize you believe deep down. Which leads us to Murphy's law of belief. What I think is interesting is that he's not just saying, think positive. He's saying something much deeper than that.
Yeah, he's saying that your subconscious is going to manifest whatever you believe to be true. And it doesn't matter if it's actually true or not. So this isn't about wishful thinking. It's about making sure your beliefs match up with what you want to achieve. If you can convince your subconscious that something is true, then it will work to make it your reality.
So how do you actually convince your subconscious of something like that?
Well, that's where autosuggestion comes in.
Right. So it's not enough to just hope for something. You've got to work to actually get it in your subconscious.
Exactly. So autosuggestion is basically the process of planting suggestions in your subconscious. And it's done through repetition, visualization, and feeling the reality of what you want. For example, Murphy talks about this singer who used autosuggestion to get over stage fright.
I remember that one. She was completely debilitating.
Yes.
So it's about retraining your mind to have confidence in yourself and your abilities. What are some other ways that autosuggestion can be used in everyday life?
Well, Murphy talks a lot about using affirmations, short, powerful statements to affirm what you want to achieve. So, for example, instead of saying, "I'm afraid of public speaking," you would say, "I am a confident and engaging speaker." And by saying those affirmations over and over, you're essentially reprogramming your mind.
But he also cautions against just repeating them without really believing them, right? Because that causes an internal conflict.
Absolutely. It's about the feeling behind the words. You have to believe what you're saying. And that's where visualization comes in. So Murphy really pushes the idea of imagining yourself embodying the things you want or achieving your goals.
Like creating a movie in your mind.
Right. So you see yourself being successful and you actually feel the emotions that come with that success. And he uses the example of a woman who was able to manifest an expensive handbag using this technique.
I love that story.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that example is she didn't just picture the bag, she thought about the texture and the weight, and she felt the joy of owning it. So she actually convinced her subconscious that it was already hers.
She made it real.
Yeah.
And so it's about knowing for sure that what you want is already coming.
Right. And Murphy has this great quote to explain this. Whatever you impress on your subconscious mind is expressed on the screen of space as conditions, experiences, and events. So your subconscious is basically a projector manifesting your thoughts into the world.
Wow. That's a great way to put it. And so one of the ways to do that, to impress those desires on your subconscious, according to Murphy, is through something he calls prayer therapy. What is he talking about there?
So he's describing it as a way to consciously connect with this infinite intelligence, like a higher power or universal wisdom. And it's about quieting your mind and turning your requests over to this power and having faith in the outcome.
So it's more than just saying words. It's about feeling that it's already happened.
Exactly. And this is where feeling comes in again. Murphy says that the key to prayer is not just believing that your prayers will be answered, but feeling the answer as if it's already happened.
So he has that example of the minister who heals a man with cancer just by affirming his health.
Yeah.
And, that's difficult to understand from a purely medical point of view. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it does make you wonder about the role our beliefs and expectations play in healing. Whether you believe in the power of the subconscious mind or in a higher power, I think what we can take away from that story is that faith and belief can have a real impact on our well-being.
That's a really powerful idea to think about. And it kind of leads us into another area that Murphy explores, which is the inherent healing power of the subconscious mind.
He believes that the subconscious mind is where all healing comes from, and that doctors and healers are just there to help remove obstacles. They're just helping to let that power flow.
So the power was always there.
Right.
And he shares Madame Bayer's story, who regained her sight at Lourdes even though her optic nerves had atrophied. That's just incredible, and it really challenges how we think about healing. What do you think is the takeaway from that?
I think it shows just how much potential the subconscious mind has to heal, even things that seem impossible. It makes you wonder how much more we're capable of if we can tap into that.
Right. It makes you think about all the limitations we put on ourselves. Like, what if we could overcome those limitations by simply changing our beliefs?
That's exactly what Murphy is suggesting. He's saying there's all this untapped potential in each of us. He wants us to question what we think is possible and to believe in the power of our minds to heal and change our lives.
So that brings us to the end of part 1 of our deep dive into the power of your subconscious mind. We've talked about the 2 parts of the mind, the law of belief, the power of autosuggestion and prayer, and this amazing ability we all have to heal ourselves. But we've got so much more to talk about.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the power of your subconscious mind. Before we move on, I wanted to touch on something we talked about earlier, about how doctors and healers are basically just facilitators of the subconscious mind's ability to heal. Do you think that diminishes the role of medicine at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think it's about saying that medicine isn't important. It's more about acknowledging that there's this deeper power at work, that our bodies are naturally capable of healing and our beliefs and expectations can affect that process.
Yeah.
I think maybe Murphy is suggesting that both medical science and the subconscious mind can work together.
Yeah, like they complement each other.
Right.
And it shows how the mind and body are connected. And speaking of interconnectedness, Murphy also talks about this idea of wealth consciousness. It's basically the belief that wealth and abundance are natural and can be attracted into our lives. And it's not just about money. It's more about overall prosperity and well-being.
He talks about how just saying affirmations without actually believing them can actually hold you back, right? Like saying, I am wealthy, when you don't feel that way deep down.
Yeah, because if you're constantly saying that, but your subconscious believes you're meant to struggle financially, then it's going to try to prove you right. So you need to cultivate a real feeling of abundance.
And for that, he has an affirmation that he suggests. By day and by night, I am being prospered in all my interests.
Right. So it's about changing your focus from what you lack to what you have and what's on its way.
So it's not just material wealth. It's about inner peace and good relationships and health.
Right, all of that.
Okay, so we've talked about healing. We've talked about wealth consciousness. But what about fear? I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. What does Murphy say about overcoming fear?
Well, he describes fear as this negative thought that is charged with emotion. Basically, it's a story we're telling ourselves about something that might happen. And so he says to replace those scary thoughts with peaceful images and affirmations.
So consciously choosing a different story.
Yeah. And he gives the example of a speaker getting over stage fright by imagining a successful presentation.
Yeah.
And they're affirming their confidence. I think a lot of us can relate to that fear in some way.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's about training your mind to respond differently to things that you see as a threat. You're focusing on what you want to happen instead of what could go wrong.
And this ties into how he talks about having good relationships, right? Like the golden rule.
Mm-hmm.
Treating others how you want to be treated.
Exactly. So our thoughts and beliefs don't just shape our own reality. They affect how we interact with everyone else. And he really stresses how important it is to forgive, because holding on to resentment or anger is only going to hurt us in the end.
It's about letting go of those negative feelings and choosing to have peace and compassion instead.
Right. And he also talks about loving and accepting yourself. He says that we can't really love other people until we've learned to love ourselves.
So seeing your own worth and treating yourself with kindness. What's interesting is how he relates all of this healing wealth relationships back to the power of the subconscious mind. It's like he's saying if we can master our inner world, we can change everything in our lives.
Right. It's all connected. He's not just giving us the techniques. He's offering us a whole new way of looking at ourselves and the world. Recognizing the power we have to shape our own reality with our thoughts and beliefs.
He's saying we can create our own lives. And one thing he emphasizes is that the subconscious mind doesn't really see a difference between imagination and reality. So if you can convince your subconscious that something is true, it will work to make it happen in your life.
Right, and that brings us to the importance of suggestion. He talks about autosuggestion, which is where we intentionally plant suggestions in our own minds, but then there's also heterosuggestion, where those suggestions are coming from outside sources.
And he warns about the effects of negative suggestions, especially those from our childhood, shaping how we think and act.
He gives that really powerful example of the man who kept hearing, "I'd give my right arm to see my daughter cured," and then ended up losing his arm in an accident, even though his daughter remained ill. It really makes you think about how powerful language can be and how much our environment can affect our subconscious mind.
Yeah, because we're exposed to so many messages all the time, from the news, social media, advertising. And are we really choosing what we let into our minds, or are we just absorbing everything?
It's about realizing those influences are there and deciding what we want to believe. Choosing our thoughts like we choose what we eat.
And this ties into what Murphy says about using positive language.
Yeah.
He thinks words have a certain power. They can lift us up or bring us down.
Yeah, words definitely have energy. They can change how we feel, what we believe, even our physical health. Remember how Murphy says the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality? So if we keep putting ourselves down saying, "I can't," or "I'm afraid," that's basically telling our subconscious that we're going to fail.
Yeah, it's like setting yourself up for failure.
Exactly. But when we use positive and encouraging words, it gives us power, it builds our confidence, and helps us create a better reality.
He has this technique called the decree, which is where you basically declare what you want as if it's already true.
It's about using words to line up with what we believe and what we expect to happen.
So it's not just thinking positive, it's about your words and actions matching that.
Exactly. You want your inner world and your outer world to be the same.
And then he talks about how powerful our subconscious mind is when we're asleep. He says that even though our conscious mind is resting, our subconscious is still working hard, processing information and doing all these things to keep our bodies running.
Right. And he says that the subconscious doesn't have the same limits of time and space as the conscious mind. So it can access all this knowledge and creativity.
And so he says that we should use that time before we go to sleep to put positive suggestions in our minds.
He calls it the passing over technique, which is where you think about what you want, feel it as if it's already happened, and hold on to that feeling as you fall asleep, like you're handing it over to your subconscious to work on overnight.
So you're using that sleep time for something more than just resting.
Right.
I've heard about people solving problems or getting creative ideas in their dreams. Is that part of this?
Definitely. Murphy says that your subconscious is really open to suggestions when you're sleeping, so it's a perfect time to use these techniques and tap into your creativity.
We spend so much time sleeping, like a third of our lives. What if we could use all that time to learn and grow and change?
That's exactly what Murphy wants us to do. He wants us to see how powerful our subconscious minds are, not just when we're awake, but also when we're asleep.
So we're not just passively going to sleep. We can actually use our minds to plant seeds of change that will grow as we sleep.
Exactly. It's about understanding that even when you're asleep, your mind is still working. It's still creating.
Wow. So it's about being aware of our power to create, not just in the world around us, but also in our dreams. So welcome back, the last part of our deep dive into Joseph Murphy's The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. We've covered a lot of ground, the different parts of the mind, the power of belief, how to make our subconscious work for us. But one thing that really sticks with me is Murphy's idea that our subconscious can guide us to our true purpose.
Yeah, it's like there's this well of wisdom and inspiration inside each of us just waiting to be discovered. He calls it infinite intelligence, and he thinks it can show us our true path and help us reach our full potential.
Like an internal compass. But how do we actually hear it with all the noise from the outside world, all those expectations and suggestions? How do we even start to listen to that inner voice?
Murphy says it's about being still and open. Practices like meditation and prayer can help quiet the conscious mind so we can hear those whispers from our subconscious.
So turning off all that mental chatter, the worries and to-do lists and all those voices telling us who we should be.
Exactly. It's about creating that inner quiet so we can connect with our deeper wisdom.
He also says to pay attention to our intuition, those gut feelings. But how do we know if it's really intuition or just wishful thinking? How do we learn to trust those little nudges from our subconscious?
It takes practice. The more we listen to our intuition, the more we recognize how it guides us, and then it becomes easier to separate it from all the other noise in our heads.
He shares stories of people who followed their intuition even when it didn't make sense, and they ended up making amazing discoveries or achieving incredible success, like Dr. Banting and insulin. That wasn't just logic and science. It was this sudden insight, almost like it came out of nowhere.
And Murphy believes that those aha moments come from our subconscious working behind the scenes. It's like it's always collecting information, connecting the dots, and then giving us the answer at the right time.
It's like when you're stuck on a problem and you can't figure it out. Then you take a break or you sleep on it, and suddenly there's the solution.
Right, like your subconscious needed that time to process everything and then show you the answer.
So it's about trusting that process even when we don't get it. And that leads us back to what we talked about before, the power of words. Murphy is big on using positive language. He believes that words have a vibration and can either lift us up or bring us down. I know some people might think it's just semantics, but I think there's truth to it. What do you think?
I think so too. Words have energy. They can make us feel things. They shape what we believe, and they can even change things in the real world. And going back to what Murphy said about the subconscious mind not knowing the difference between what we imagine and what's real, well, if we keep putting ourselves down, saying, I can't, or I'm afraid, then we're programming ourselves for failure.
It's like we're making it happen with our words.
Exactly. But when we use positive and encouraging words, we're giving ourselves power, building our confidence, and making things better.
And he mentions this technique called the decree, where you declare what you want as if it's already true.
It's about matching our words with what we believe and expect.
So it's more than just positive thinking. It's about aligning everything, our thoughts, our words, and what we do.
Right, making the inside and the outside match.
He also talks about being grateful, focusing on the good things in our lives, even the little things, as a way to attract more abundance. It seems so simple, but it can really change things.
It's about changing how we see things, choosing to see what we have instead of what's missing. And that change in perspective can affect our thoughts, our feelings, even our physical health.
And lastly, Murphy reminds us that this journey of figuring ourselves out and changing for the better is a process. It's not a one-time thing. It's something we work on every day. There's no end point. It's about showing up each day and trying to create a more positive and powerful mindset.
It's about enjoying the journey with all its ups and downs and trusting that we're always changing, always becoming more of who we're supposed to be.
He has this great quote. You are the captain of your soul, subconscious mind, and the master of your fate. Remember, you have the capacity to choose. Choose life. Choose love. Choose health. Choose happiness. It's a call to action, to step into our power, harness our subconscious minds, and create a life of purpose, joy, and abundance. So as we finish our deep dive into the power of your subconscious mind, I want you to ask yourself, what kind of world are you creating with your thoughts and beliefs? It's a question worth thinking about. Read the book, try the techniques we discussed, and keep exploring the potential within you. Thanks for joining us.